State Senator William Musto of Hudson County said today he's eager to go on trial, but once again the trial that was to start tomorrow has been delayed. Musto faces charges of conspiring to protect an illegal baccarat game in Union City between 1974 and 75. The trial has been postponed for more than a year, and this latest delay was requested by the federal government. Spokesmen say the reason for the request must be kept secret. As of now, the trial has been rescheduled for February 21st.
State Senator and Union City Mayor William Musto, along with 8 others, including Union City officials and contractors, were indicted today by a federal grand jury in Newark. The wide-ranging 36-count indictment charges the 9 with racketeering, fraud, and extortion in an alleged kickback scheme involving federally funded construction projects. The indictment alleges the 64-year-old Musto and Union City officials used their political influence to get government approval for renovations at 2 Union City high schools and construction of an office building and 2 senior citizen housing projects. Allegedly, contractors for the projects also paid about $430,000 in bribes to the 4 public officials. Indicted along with Musto were Frank Scarafilli, age 52, a former deputy police chief in Union City, and a member of the Board of Education there. John Powers, 40, president of the Union City School Board. Gildo Amon, 65, executive director of the Union City Housing Authority. John Bertoli, 49, chairman of the North Bergen Housing Authority. Also indicted and connected with the contractor, Anthony Genovese and Thomas Princip of West Nyack, Lawrence Dentico of Bronxville, and Dominic D'Agostino, a Garfield contractor. Musto, who was on the Senate floor today in Trenton this afternoon, declined to talk to New Jersey Nightly News. And today a spokesman for the governor said Byrne would not press Musto to resign his position as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
State Senator William Musto and 4 political allies were indicted today on federal income tax charges. Musto, who was also mayor of Union City, was indicted in April on racketeering charges along with 8 others. Now, the new indictment adds 10 counts, charging that Musto and 4 other Union City officials falsely reported their federal income taxes in 1978 and 1979. The other officials are Union City School Board President John Powers, City Grantsman Gildo Amon, School Trustee Frank Scarafiel, and School Architect Anthony Genovese. The 4 were also charged in the earlier indictment, which prosecutors say involved a scheme to squeeze $440,000 from an allegedly mob-connected construction firm. Union City Mayor William Musto and 4 associates pleaded innocent today to federal racketeering charges. Then the judge in the case denied a prosecution motion to have Musto's trial start in October. U.S. District Judge H. Lee Sarakin ruled that to try Musto in October, in the middle of the campaign season, would prejudice Musto's re-election bid. So the trial will start November 4th instead. Musto and 4 others are charged with trying to squeeze payoffs out of a construction company with alleged ties to organized crime.
The federal government's key witness in the trial of State Senator William Musto has implicated Governor Byrne in a plan to assure Musto a loan from the Housing Finance Agency. Ralph Orlandini, a contractor who received a $7.5 million loan from the agency to build an apartment building, said that Union City Board of Education President John Powers told him that Musto phoned the governor insisting that the project be built. Orlandini testified earlier that he had been told the project was shelved and admitted he gave payoffs to Powers, one of 7 co-defendants in the trial. A spokesman for Byrne said there would be no comment until the testimony at today's trial was studied. The defendants are charged with racketeering, fraud, and bribery. State Senator William Musto took the stand in federal court today, denying any part of a Union City scheme to get thousands of dollars in kickbacks. It was Musto's second day on the stand. He and 7 others are charged with racketeering and conspiracy in a complicated plot to drain Union City of public construction funds. Diane Doctor reports from Newark.
William Musto is the best known of 8 defendants in the case, being both a state senator and Union City's mayor. Musto's attorney, Irving Analik, repeatedly asked his client whether he had any knowledge of bribes or illegalities. Musto said he had none. Analik played a tape recording made by Rudolph Orlandini, the government's chief witness. Orlandini was part owner of the Orlando Construction Company, the firm that prosecutors allege was run through a pattern of racketeering by Musto and the other defendants, some with ties to organized crime. Orlandini secretly recorded a conversation with Musto back in August of 1980. On the tape, Orlandini discusses bribe money given to former Union City Deputy Police Chief Frank Scarafile, one of Musto's co-defendants. Musto denied any knowledge of the bribes. Analik asked whether Musto had ever been offered money by Orlandini. Musto replied, "No way," and said as far as he's concerned, Orlandini is a complete liar. But later, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jim Plaisted questioned Musto about his relationship with Orlandini, pointing out a letter of recommendation Musto had written for him in 1979. Plaisted brought up Musto's support of Orlandini, despite newspaper reports full of adverse publicity about him and his Orlando construction company. Musto will take the stand again tomorrow for another day of cross-examination. The case, which began November 4th, is not expected to be completed until at least next month. In Newark, I'm Diane Doctor.
Defense attorneys for Union City Mayor William Musto and 7 co-defendants called the prosecution's top witness a paranoid liar today as they summed up their case in Newark Federal Court. Witness Rudolph Orlandini was characterized by lawyers as a man who deceived the defendants in his own scheme to siphon funds from publicly financed projects in Union City. Musto and the others are charged with racketeering in a trial that has already run 4 months. Since the trial began, Musto has been faced with strong political opposition in Union City, where he has been a long-standing political force. Diane Doctor reports.
This has been Bill Musto's castle for more than 3 decades, City Hall in Union City. But since early November, Musto has been making a daily trip to federal court in Newark. He and 7 others are charged with conspiring to pocket thousands in public construction funds through a pattern of racketeering and bribery. Musto hasn't said whether he'll run for city office again, with elections slated for May.
I'd say that after his 35 years of expertise, he's showing signs of weakness.
Parks Commissioner Ron Dario, formerly a Musto supporter, is now leading a drive to unseat the mayor. Since that decision, Dario has been removed from control of programs, like a city-sponsored daycare center in this building. Dario charges similar actions have been taken against others who've turned against Musto.
Well, it's one that I never thought that Bill would stoop that low, so to speak, to fire people off the bat, to intimidate, to harass. I never thought it was his brand of politics.
If we're supposedly what they say, if we're as bad as they say, if I could use that expression, then why would they want to continue to work here?
Public Works Commissioner Bill Botti has been called Musto's strongest ally.
There's a lot of wishful thinking by ex-Musto supporters who are trying to take advantage of his personal problems or his problems in Newark for their own personal gain.
The barbs aren't just for TV cameras. From these calm City Hall offices come reports of shouting matches between employees on both sides of the political war. And both sides, meantime, are scurrying to attract Union City's Cuban residents, now estimated at 60% of the city's population. The elderly, traditionally a Musto power base, are being wooed by his opponents. The residents have been bombarded by headlines about the battle and their mayor.
Well, I think he's at the end of the line as far as being mayor of this city.
He hasn't done anything, I don't think, to harm the city. So.
Next month, Union City voters will decide between pro-Musto and anti-Musto candidates during city school board elections. Observers say this could be the first critical test of the mayor's political strength, as well as the strength of his opponents and the influence of his trial. In Union City, I'm Diane Doctor.
In Newark, the jury in the racketeering trial of State Senator William Musto has been sequestered for the night following their first day of deliberations. Diane Doctor reports.
You are the sole judges of the issues of fact, said U.S. District Court Judge H. Lee Sarakin as he began instructing the jury. The 9-woman, 3-man panel has been hearing this case since November. It has been the longest federal corruption trial in New Jersey history. They will decide the fate of New Jersey's ranking state legislator, State Senator William Musto, and his 7 co-defendants. Musto, also Union City's mayor, is charged with using his political influence to aid the complicated schemes of corrupt contractors. The target, public construction projects, primarily in Union City. The prosecution charges Musto and others, like former Union City Deputy Police Chief Frank Scarafile, received $500,000 in bribes. That for granting lucrative construction contracts, loans, and tax abatements to the Orlando Construction Company. Musto's attorney today was expressing optimism.
Hopeful that the jury will vindicate what we believe to be a very arduous, a very, shall I say, heart-rending type of trial for a man who has run a gauntlet of prosecutorial vindictiveness.
As the jury deliberates, they will have with them transcripts of taped conversations between an FBI informant and Musto, as well as other defendants. The government's hopes rest on the tapes and the testimony of that informant, Rudolph Orlandini. Orlandini, formerly part owner of Orlando Construction, detailed bribes paid to Musto and others and provided the court with a taped discussion with Musto during which he informed the state senator of the payoff plots. On the stand, Musto denied knowledge of the bribes and said he didn't know what Orlandini was talking about during the conversation. Musto's attorney has charged Orlandini framed his client and the other Union City officials to save himself. During instructions, Judge Sarakin cautioned jurors to carefully consider each count of the 46-count indictment separately against each defendant. The judge urged the panel to use their common sense and base their decisions not on the words of attorneys, but on the testimony of witnesses and the evidence.
The jury has seen thousands of pieces of evidence and heard 4 months of testimony. As a result, nobody expects a quick decision in this complex case. At the federal courthouse in Newark, I'm Diane Doctor.
State Senator and Union City Mayor William Musto and 7 other defendants have been found guilty of racketeering and conspiracy charges following a 21-week trial in Newark. Diane Doctor, who has been covering the trial, is in our Newark studio with a report. Diane?
Kent, it was an emotional end to an emotional trial. Just after jury foreman Robert Fitzgibbons read the long series of guilty verdicts, a poll of the jury was requested. Juror Josephine Melnick did not agree with the verdict. The jury was removed from the court. When they were brought back in, another poll was taken. This time, Mrs. Melnick agreed. The jury was finally dismissed over the objections of defense attorneys, and the longest criminal trial in federal court history in New Jersey was over. State Senator William Musto has been convicted of racketeering, extortion, mail fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, and interstate travel in the aid of racketeering. As he emerged from the federal courthouse, he promised the case would be appealed and maintained his innocence.
What is your reaction to the verdict?
Well, I'm very unhappy with it. I reiterate, I've never violated a public trust and never will.
The penalties Musto faces are stiff. For each of 2 racketeering counts, a maximum of 20 years in jail, $25,000 in fines. For each of 3 extortion charges, 20 years in jail, $10,000 in fines. Other Union City public officials convicted of similar charges include former school board president John Powers and former deputy police chief Frank Scarafield. Larry Dentico and Dominic DiAgostino also convicted. Prosecutors allege both men are tied to organized crime and held controlling interests in the Orlando Construction Company, the firm that Musto and the others helped to obtain lucrative public construction contracts in Hudson County.
Judge H. Lee Sarakin set May 10th for sentencing in the case. Kent?
Diane, in your report, you mentioned the problems that the jury was having in coming up with this verdict. Why did the jurors have to go back for a second poll on the verdict?
Kent, during the first reading of the verdict, the courtroom was basically in an uproar. Musto's wife, Rita, cried, had to be restrained. Some of the jurors were also crying. Mrs. Melnick, the juror who disagreed with the verdict the first time around, basically had appeared to be not in control. The defense attorneys were questioning the verdict. The whole atmosphere in the courtroom was charged, and the judge felt that the jury should be sequestered. And when they came back in, basically, you know, he brought them forward and said, we'll take a poll again. They polled them again, and this time the woman changed her mind.
Diane, will Senator Musto have to resign as a result of this?
Kent, state law says William Musto can remain in office until all of his appeals are exhausted, and that promises to be a very long time.
Thank you very much, Diane Doctor.
Defense attorneys for State Senator William Musto and 7 others convicted on federal racketeering charges were in court today arguing that the controversial verdict be thrown out. Diane Doctor reports.
William Musto, New Jersey's ranking state senator and Union City's mayor, could spend the rest of his life in jail if his March racketeering and extortion conviction remains intact. It was day one of post-trial motions for Musto and his co-defendants, most of them Hudson County public officials. As expected, arguments this day centered on the so-called flip-flop verdict in the case. You'll recall juror Josephine Melnick said she disagreed with the guilty verdict after a poll of the jury. In the pandemonium that followed, the jury was sent to resume deliberations, and federal judge H. Lee Sarakin didn't acknowledge Mrs. Melnick's efforts to speak to him. During a second polling of the jury a little while later, Mrs. Melnick said hesitatingly she'd support the guilty verdict. Defense attorney Joseph Hayden pointed to that incident and to problems during jury deliberations with another juror, Grace Stidel. In attacking the guilty verdict, Hayden told Judge Sarakin that the flip-flop decision was a violation of the defendant's constitutionally guaranteed rights to a non-pressure jury verdict. Said Hayden, it was obvious from the tearful and worn appearance of some members of the jury that they were under unfair pressure, possibly from their peers. As a worn-looking William Musto looked on, his attorney, Irving Analik, challenged the judge's decision not to find out what Mrs. Melnick wanted to talk to him about. Analik said she might have said she wasn't capable of rendering a fair verdict, but the judge pointed out the court is prohibited from asking about the content of jury deliberations, and the discussion with Mrs. Melnick could have violated that rule. The defense wants, at the very least, a hearing into the circumstances of the verdict. Tomorrow, Assistant U.S. Attorney Sam Rosenthal and other government prosecutors will defend the verdict and also argue motions that Bill Musto should be jailed, his bail revoked. Judge Sarakin is expected to decide on some of the motions Thursday. Sentencing in the case is set for Monday, one day before Bill Musto seeks re-election in Union City. In Newark, I'm Diane Doctor.
Prosecutors rejected the argument today that the racketeering conviction of State Senator William Musto be thrown out. Defense attorneys for Musto and his 7 co-defendants have been arguing for a mistrial because of the unusually emotional behavior of jurors in the case. Diane Doctor reports.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Sam Rosenthal defended the guilty verdict in the Musto case, which took 5 months to try and cost millions of dollars to prosecute. Rosenthal argued against defense claims that a crying juror who twice changed her mind about the verdict is enough to warrant a mistrial. William Musto, also Union City's mayor, has maintained his innocence throughout the trial. His attorney, Irving Analik, and other defense attorneys want, at the very least, an inquiry held into the matter. Rosenthal rejected the call for the inquiry, saying the defense hadn't produced any evidence that the juror was incapable of making a competent decision. There cannot be a meaningful inquiry, said Rosenthal, without damaging the court-protected integrity of jury deliberations. Federal Judge H. Lee Sarakin is expected to issue his decisions on the motions Friday. Sentencing has also been set for Friday, a few days before Musto's May 11th bid for re-election in Union City. There had been speculation about the impact of the sentencing on the powerful Hudson County politician. But if Judge Sarakin decides to hold an inquiry, that could delay sentencing until after the election. The prosecution has argued against any delay, but the defense says to accept the verdict as it stands is to accept a tainted verdict. At the federal courthouse in Newark, I'm Diane Doctor.
New Jersey's senior legislator, State Senator William Musto, was sentenced to 7 years in jail today for his March conviction on federal racketeering charges. The sentencing comes just 1 day before Musto's bid for re-election as mayor of Union City. Diane Doctor reports.
The 65-year-old Musto had faced up to 20 years in jail on each of 2 racketeering convictions and 20 years for each of 3 extortion charges. Prosecutor Jim Plaisted pushed for the maximum sentence. Plaisted described the crimes to federal judge H. Lee Sarakin: a pattern of perjury, a pattern of corruption, an effort to keep a stranglehold on Union City, where Musto is mayor. Speaking in his own defense, Musto stood up and faced a silent, crowded courtroom. In a calm, raspy voice, the powerful Hudson County politician said, "I have never violated a public trust, and I never will." But Judge Sarakin said it is imperative that the courts proclaim that corruption must not be tolerated. The victims, said the judge, are the children of Union City. They may grow up believing graft and corruption are commonplace rather than the exception. Still, Musto's sentence was far less than what might have been. 7 years in jail and no fines imposed. Musto's wife, Rita, who'd broken down and cried during the verdict, was controlled today. She appeared grateful, as the judge said, to impose fines would be to punish the families of the defendants, who have suffered enough. The judge said he'd received many letters of support for the defendants. Musto is counting on that support in tomorrow's Union City elections.
I don't think I've ever run for public office without expecting to win. Again, that'll be a judgment that people will make, and I will abide by that judgment as I have before. You win some, you lose some. The only thing that I pray to God I haven't lost, I don't think I have, is the love and respect of the people where I live.
And Musto reaffirmed his innocence, especially on allegations concerning organized crime.
I tell you and all the American public, I've never met a mobster. I don't know any mobsters. If I did meet any, I might have met them when I come to court here if they are mobsters. I don't even know that.
Tomorrow, the State Attorney General's office will begin legal proceedings to have Musto removed from public office. The state is acting under the provisions of a 1979 state statute.
In the meantime, Musto is free on $100,000 bail pending his appeal. The appeal will be filed within the next 10 days, but the legal process following that could take several months. At the federal courthouse in Newark, I'm Diane Doctor.
Associates of the Genovese organized crime family are behind efforts to overturn the racketeering convictions of ousted State Senator William Musto and 6 co-defendants. That's what the government charged today. The disclosure was made in court papers urging U.S. District Judge H. Lee Sarakin to reject motions to reconsider a new trial. That motion was made by co-defendants Lawrence Dentico of New York and Dominic D'Agostino of Garfield. They were both convicted in March of bribing Musto in exchange for favorable treatment for a construction firm they controlled. Local 54 President Frank Gerace may take the stand before the Casino Control Commission tomorrow. That's the last day of hearings on the labor union's right to represent its membership. Gerace's attorney told the commission today he would ask his client to reappear as a witness, but said Gerace would probably answer its questions by pleading the Fifth Amendment. The commission must decide whether to disqualify Local 54 from representing its 14,000 members on the basis of alleged mob ties. It will hear summations on the case in mid-September.
A federal judge in Newark today handed down a suspended sentence to Rudolph Orlandini, the state star witness who helped convict former State Senator William Musto and 6 others on racketeering charges. Orlandini, a Bayonne contractor, entered the federal witness protection program 2 years ago. According to Assistant U.S. Attorney Marianne Desmond, Orlandini's testimony was the single most important ingredient in the case against Musto. Desmond also told Judge H. Lee Sarakin that Orlandini continued to cooperate with federal officials after a $250,000 contract had been taken out on his life. In handing down the sentence, Judge Sarakin agreed that a prison term could jeopardize Orlandini's life. Former state senator and Union City Mayor William Musto can keep on gambling in Atlantic City's casinos if he wants to. The Casino Control Commission has voted 3-1 not to bar Musto because of his conviction last year on racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy charges. State law allows the commission to bar anyone convicted of a crime of moral turpitude or sentenced to at least 6 months in prison. Musto faces a 7-year term. He's now out on bail pending appeal. But the commission majority decided the public would not lose confidence in the casino industry's integrity if Musto is allowed to gamble. More than 80 people are now on the casino industry blacklist. Most of them have been convicted of cheating at casinos or allegedly have ties to organized crime.
Robert Body pleaded innocent to all charges against him at his federal court arraignment today. The 42-year-old Body is accused of conspiracy, tax evasion, and mail fraud in connection with a bid-rigging scheme involving Hudson County's Vocational Technical School. Federal authorities say Body defrauded the school of more than $50,000 when he was a janitorial and maintenance supply salesman. Body was released on his own recognizance, and a December 6th trial date was set. Body was William Musto's hand-picked successor as Union City's mayor. Authorities say the charges against both grow out of the same investigation. That investigation resulted in Musto's racketeering conviction and 7-year jail sentence. Ken?
Former Union City Mayor William Musto has strong feelings about the Body indictment, and tonight producer Janice Sellinger and correspondent Michael Aaron present an in-depth interview with William Musto. Michael?
Kent, as Bill Musto sees it, the U.S. Attorney's Office waited until after Bob Body became mayor to indict him, because then it could say it caught a bigger fish. It's part of what Musto sees as a vendetta against him, his political associates, and his city.
That system of justice.
He is a legendary figure in New Jersey, although William Musto says the press didn't start calling him that until he'd been accused of being crooked. He holds the record for the longest uninterrupted tenure in the state legislature, 36 years. For 16 of those years, he was simultaneously the mayor of Union City. So powerful and popular is he in Union City that the day after a judge sentenced him to 7 years in prison on a federal racketeering charge last spring, Union City voters re-elected him. His trial had been the longest in state history, 21 weeks. He had been called a crime czar, and he ended up being stripped of both his public offices. Musto insists he is innocent, and his influence lives on. The people of Union City elected his wife Rita to his seat on the city commission. They elected his close friend Nicholas LaRocca to fill his seat in the state senate, and the city commissioners named his protege Bob Body as mayor. Body, as we reported earlier, was arraigned today on a charge of bid rigging. Yesterday, we spoke with Musto in his living room about his legal troubles, those of his successor, and whether or not he is still calling the shots in Union City.
People still think you're running this district, that there's a machine here, and what do you...
No truth to that at all. There's no more machines today.
They say you're the last of the machine-type politicians.
I'm not a machine-type politician. You see, this is what's wrong. I happen to be the kind of an individual, I hope, that's dedicated himself to 36 years of doing things that he liked, not to making money.
Looking at Union City from the outside, your wife is a city commissioner, your hand-picked successor is the mayor, your best friend, or so he's described, has your state senate seat. It looks as if you're still in office in various guises.
Unfortunately, everything you've said is untrue. I can't stop people from interpreting that. That may be an interpretation that Hudson County has because of the media, but it's not so.
You're telling me that the facts are correct, but there's just nothing sinister about it.
No, nothing at all, and I don't know how to explain to the media or people that ask me these questions that if they'll only come up here and look, they'll find out. I mean, what machine, what jobs? I mean, what do they call a machine? Frank Hague, yes. Johnny Kenney, yes. But in those days, they didn't have civil service. They didn't have tenure.
When did they start breathing down your neck? When did they?
I would say they started breathing down my neck when I didn't even know about it. When I was a target and they never told me. And that was during the day when my dad, who was convicted on the Board of Education, unjustly so, 82 years old, and a young man by the name of John Powers is on a board. He was acquitted at the time. Another guy, Joe Lugas, an architect that never did a dishonest thing in his life. He was convicted. And you had to be there to see their operations. I was a novice. I didn't understand. It was all new to me what was taking place. I had never had any problems criminally. You know, I have never been investigated by the Hudson County Prosecutor's Office or the Attorney General's Office of this state.
Let's talk about Bob Body. Are you particularly burned up about his indictment?
I'm upset. I think if there's any justification to the allegations against Bob Body, this wasn't the way to do it. A year and a half later, they indict him? They knew all this for a year and a half. What the hell are they waiting for?
It sounds like...
They want to smear me, and smear me. They want to break me financially and every other way, or these indictments wouldn't be coming down. So in this instance, even though I feel I am a victim, I want to have this corrected on a basis that's constructive, intelligent, and brought to the public to give us a cure for that U.S. Attorney's Office in Newark, which I believe is operating with a malicious intent to only accomplish one thing, convictions. You're not to prosecute, you're not to persecute, you're to prosecute. And If you look at the record of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Newark, particularly at the moment with Union City, you'll find persecution, not prosecution. Or else they would have said, well, we've convicted Bill Musto, we've done this, that's it. But they still want to destroy this area politically. For what? Why? What is so important about the U.S. attorneys pursuing election law irregularities, which, in my opinion, don't even exist, and not saying, well, look, this is a local matter. Let's refer it to the Hudson County Prosecutor's Office. Let's refer it to the SCI. Let's refer it to the Attorney General's Office.
What's this done to you personally? Is it eating you up inside? Is it a great embarrassment?
Well, of course it's an embarrassment. You think that girl married to me for 36 years, my wife, my mother, a grandmother of 3, never did anything in her life. She doesn't have a flock. She doesn't have a summer home even. She's never been to Europe. She doesn't go to Florida. She's got no big diamond rings. See, that doesn't mean anything to those mongrels out there. And this becomes the Musto case. The crime czar. I'm an alleged crime czar, and a television blasted on a television, newspapers headline it while my elections are on. Do you know I never met a mobster in my life?
How do you feel about all this?
I feel horrible. I feel horrible about being convicted. I feel horrible about not being a mayor or a senator. I feel horrible not being a lawyer today, able to practice law. That I have to be delayed with this appeal. I'm so impatient to find out if the appellate division is going to recognize what took place. I don't know.
This afternoon, I called Mr. Musto to find out what he knew about today's indictment of Hudson County Prosecutor Harold Ruvolt, Jr. Musto said the first man he ever campaigned with had been Harold Ruvolt, Sr., but that he didn't know the son that well. He found it significant that the alleged offenses occurred before Ruvolt, Jr. became prosecutor, and he argued that the prosecutor's office should not be considered tainted as a result of the indictment. He also reminded me several times that just because you're indicted doesn't mean you're guilty.